New Buddha Way Dhamma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
See you all again. We soldier on. Things keep changing. And it seems to be that things are going to get worse before they get better. But it's all a test and a trial for us to see how much we've learned in the last few years from the Buddha Dharma. We know that all things are impermanent. We know that we have our likes and dislikes that we're attached to. We very much want things to be our way, but they never are for very long. So we carry on and we learn about life. And at least we've got companionship and our community, which is such a great support at a time like this, which only a year ago we could never have envisaged. That's the meaning of impermanence. We don't know what's coming next. I think we'll go back to basics today. I want to talk about something that's been referred to as the heart of Buddhism. And it's a verse which is in the Dhammapada. Now, most of you will have heard of the Dhammapada, which is a collection of short verses, which is, they say, amongst the oldest teachings of the Buddha. And it's been handed down through many generations. So we're talking about probably 5th century origins, 5th century before Christ, that is. And what the Dhammapada says about doing the right thing, if you like, in simple terms, talking about what is most fundamental in our moral stance or behavior. So the Dhammapada is a very old sutta, and if you're interested in it, I don't know how you can be a Buddhist and not interested in it, but there is a Penguin publication version of the Dhammapada, which is really excellent. It's got lots of notes on each verse. There are many different translations. I think I've got at least 3 translations on my shelf, which is useful sometimes because you think that word doesn't seem to be right, and then you look across and see there's a different translation of it, which does make better sense. Okay, so here's a little verse which is said to be the heart of Buddhism, and apparently it was delivered to an assembly of many of the Buddha's teachings, possibly hundreds. We don't really know. Immediately after his awakening, so within a year of his enlightenment, he's supposed to have taught this, and much later, it started being recited, joining the oral tradition of conveying things not through writing but through hearing what somebody has to say about what somebody else has said. So what is this heart of Buddhism? Well, I'll tell you. We've got one translation here for you. One is not to do. I'll tell you exactly what is there. Not to do evil. But that word evil is problematic, as we shall see in a moment. Not to do evil, to cultivate goodness, and to purify one's mind. If there were just 3 things one had to remember, not that one has to remember, but if you're interested in the Buddha's teaching and incorporating it in your life, and here are 3 things that we need to keep constantly in mind, is that one shouldn't be doing evil. Now, not doing evil means restraining oneself from doing things that perhaps one would like to do, but one can't do or shouldn't do. So it's self-restraint, but it's broader than that. It's also about non-acquisition and non-possessiveness, not constantly wanting more, not wanting to possess more, not being precious about the things that one has. No, this is mine, you can't have it. All of this requires restraint, because in some ways at heart we are still children, and would like to do all sorts of things, or have all sorts of things, or keep all sorts of things away from other people and make it mine. We'll come back to that question of children in a moment. Not to do evil, to cultivate goodness. By goodness, we mean love, compassion, concern for others, and to cultivate that. Cultivating suggests something that continues. It's not just, occasionally I remember to be good, or I pat myself on the head for having done something good. But I start developing an attitude of goodness, of just doing things for other people who are less fortunate than ourselves, and appreciating how whatever fortune we may have in life, other people don't have them. So, to take an example, we are still getting food delivered to our door, many of us. I get food delivered to my door. But when you think about it, there are now probably millions of people who haven't got a door, let alone food for somebody else to put there. And with climate change, there's going to be starvation on a big scale, which is already developing. We cultivate goodness. I'm always very proud of what New Buddha Way does, through Buddhist Global Relief and through its support for food banks. Thirdly, to purify or to cleanse one's mind. Now, what would that be about, do you think? Well, I'll give you a guess, but obviously it's referring to meditational techniques, such as those included in right effort and in mindfulness. So there are only three things to remember. Restrain yourself, not to do anything that is harmful, prefer the word harmful to evil. Cultivate goodness in yourself. We're not talking about cultivating other people's goodness. We can chastise people as much as we like. The big question is, do I do what I teach? I think it's a good one to keep in mind. And to purify one's mind. And the final line of 4 lines is, this is the teaching of all the Buddhas. That's interesting, isn't it? Of all the Buddhas. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. There's a little bit of a Mahayana touch there. And that is to remind us that we too can be Buddhas. It's not referring to the Buddha. And in the Buddha's account of his meditation efforts, he himself refers to previous Buddhas. So the teaching is that there have been many Buddhas, and that there will be more Buddhas in the future. He never claimed to be the Buddha. Others claimed him to be the Buddha. So this is the teaching of all the Buddhas, what I've just told you. We've got to ask ourselves, what does that actually mean? Why all the Buddhas? Well, it's saying that, these 3 requirements or directions are, or whatever you want to call them, are something which is common to humanity and anyone who is learning from these teachings. So it's not the teaching of the Buddha in the sense that it belongs to him, or we should put it in quotation marks. He's talking about human beings. This is the teaching of all human beings that we learn through living our lives and doing difficult things and not getting what we want, etc. That is where we learn and become adults and liberated individuals. Okay, so that's, if you're going to look for that verse, if maybe you've got a copy of the Dhammapada I know some people have. This is verse 185, 183. 183, there you'll find various translations of it. Now let's show you how far this little verse has gone through history, because it has survived for like 2,500 years, which is pretty remarkable. But it's handed down even to the Mahayana, which is, a different approach to the Buddha's teachings, but still the basics are the same. And that is that 1,300 years later, 1,300 years later, someone called Dogen, who was one of the leading meditation teachers of the time in Japan, was giving a talk on precisely this teaching within the Dhammapada. So now let's switch to the 13th century and Mahayana, where Dogen Eiheiji gave a talk called in Japanese Shuaku Makusa, which translated means refrain from all evil whatsoever, which is chapter 9 of the compilation of his teachings, which is the heaviest book I've got on my shelf. It really weighs a ton. And he's very important because Dogen is the person who founded the Soto Zen tradition. So when we hear about Japanese or Chinese Buddhism, there are some parts of it which are really quite different. But at least we can say that there was never a reformation, so there was never any bloody battles between the Mahayana and the Theravada. That would have been ridiculous for Buddhists. They had their differences, but they would discuss them and agree, and sometimes agree to disagree. Anyway, Dogen Zenji, or Dogen Eiheiji as he's known, tells us this story, which I looked at again yesterday in this mighty book I've got. Some people say I've got too many mighty books. That's precisely the problem. Anyway, the story is this. In China, there was a poet, a famous poet, who also happened to be a regional governor. You don't find that sort of combination between poetry and politics these days, do you? In China, a poet and regional governor called Rakuten once asked meditation master Doreen a question, and the question is, just exactly what is the major intention of the Buddha Dharma? Just what is the major intention of the Buddha Dharma? So he's laying down the quantitative for a meditation teacher to explain the basics to him. Now, it's not surprising, is it, that Dogen's mind will go immediately to the Dhammapada and that verse 183. So we are told that Doreen, the Chinese master, replied, refrain from all evil whatsoever, uphold and practice all that is good. What's that if that's not the Dhammapada? At least 2 lines of it. Now Rakuten didn't really get the point here, and he remarked, if that's all there is to it, even a child of 3 knows how to say that. That was what Rakuten said. Obviously, Rakuten was not very impressed by these lines of the Dhammapada. And you might brush it off and think, well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? But nothing is really that obvious in the Buddha's teaching. It looks obvious, but one has got to delve into things very often. Now, so Doreen's got a ready reply for him. Doreen replied, though a 3-year-old child can say it, there are old men in their 80s who still cannot put it into practice. So it's all very well. It's, a child could repeat it, And indeed, a lot of people, ordinary adults, would repeat it. But the real question is, can we live by it? Or at least attempt to live by it as best we can? The Buddha recognizes that we're not perfect. So that was Doreen's reply. Though a 3-year-old child can say it, there are old men in their 80s who still cannot put it into practice. Rakuten then realized that he'd made a mistake, and he bowed in gratitude to the meditation master Doreen. Now, there's quite a lot we can learn from that little passage in the collection of Dogen's teachings called the Shobo Genzo. First of all, I'm just going to try and summarize what Dogen says in relation to this question from Rakuten. First of all, he says, it's not a case of evil or no evil. I knew this was going to come up somewhere. You know, we translate things as evil because we've got a different cultural background. We think there are evil people and there are good people. Buddhists are inclined to say there are evil actions and there are good actions, but we can't rubber stamp somebody as an evil person. There are no evil persons, which comes as a shock to us because we were brought up to think there are evil people, and that's why we must punish them and throw them into prison. Another way of putting it in Buddhism is that some people have certain skills and other people lack those skills, which have to do with morality. So, for example, being patient is seen as a skill. Right? So that was the first thing that Dogen says. It's not a case of evil or no evil. He says, quote, it is only that there are things that one should not do. Because that is what is said. What you need to examine is your actions and your reflexes in certain situations. And that's yours, not other people's. If you think about it, to brand somebody as evil doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't even explain anything. Is it meant to be an explanation? If so and so is evil? It doesn't explain anything. But if you say he's lacking in certain skills or certain impairments, and then we're going in the right sort of direction. So we don't dismiss the person, we dismiss the action. The Buddha was often making comments about being aware of doing good a bit too enthusiastically. That is correcting others and forgetting yourself. We call this self-righteousness or self-righteous dogma. That's another thing that, you know, when we are told about the morality and the Dhammapada, we'll now start correcting other people with it. That was not the intention. It's a teaching for the person who receives the teaching. It doesn't have any other existence, not even in the book. It's only if somebody reads it and thinks, right, that's talking about me, that it's worthwhile. We should never use any of the Buddha's teachings to castigate other people, or to say, you're not a good Buddhist, you don't know about right intention. And that is ridiculous. That shows no understanding of Buddhism whatsoever. It's a living teaching. It lives in us as individuals. And if it's not there, then it's dead. Okay, some other points. He also says, in response to Rakuten, that to think, I'm quoting now, to think that a 3-year-old child cannot give voice to the Buddha Dharma, or that a child is cute, is the height of foolishness. He doesn't mince his words, does he? So what he's saying here is quite provocative, that even a 3-year-old can actually give voice to some aspect of the Buddha, or make us think. We can learn from children with their naive, what's so-called naive questions. Now in I'd like to tell you a story which some of you have heard before, in my own experience. Was the time that when I lived in Wales, we were a working class family, and 9 of us living in one fairly small state-owned house. Our cat died. Now, we weren't people that were going to run off to any kind of professional to deal with the situation of this cat's illness and death. So we buried it in the garden. But we did so with some respect for the cat. We loved the cat. We dug a hole, we put the cat in the hole, and we put the soil over the top. Said a few words, and there were 1 or 2 children there as well. One of the children, who probably was about 3 years old, looked at where, didn't say anything at first, just looked at the cat going into the hole, being covered over, and then said to me, "Daddy, how is he going to get out? How is he going to get out of the hole?" Now, think about this in a more open-minded sort of way. We could laugh and say, well, I did laugh at the time, but at the same time, I had to respect what the child was trying to grapple with. What it was grappling with was death. That's a Buddha Dharma concern. And the child's story, put in the way a child would put it, because this hasn't got fully developed vocabulary, was, how is the cat now going to get out of the hole? We all have that question. All adults have that question. What is death? Does something happen to me after I die? How do I get out of the hole that I'm in? So that's the way in which, Dogen is saying, learn from a child. You can learn from a child, but you have to listen to a child and respect a child. That takes him on to a bit more subtle point, in which he talks about how Rakuten had missed a point about the nature of time. In Buddhism, there are the 3 worlds: the past, the present, and the future. Now we have a tendency in the West to think that all things are connected in some way by cause and effect. That is not a Buddhist teaching, despite the fact that some books actually say that is a Buddhist teaching. But that's a failure to understand what is called Buddhist metaphysics. So in this case, Rakuten seemed to be making the mistake of thinking that the past causes the present and the present causes the future. That it's all neatly packaged in stages. Now, if you understand the Buddhist teaching and teaching on time, there is no cause and effect in time. What there are is transformations. So Monday does not cause Tuesday, which should be pretty obvious, really. But Monday is transformed into Tuesday. It's all continuous. Okay? And it seemed Rakuten hadn't quite understood that, because if he understood that, he wouldn't have thought that the child, for example, was cute. Now, why do we say that children are cute? I think I've said it myself. And it's not a crime, but it's, in a way, it's dismissing the child as not knowing anything. But that child is me, or was me, at that stage in the transformation of this person we now call Geoff Hunt. So, in short, we have to respect what children say, and we have to listen to what children are saying, because that child is you. And since that time, you've been taught certain things, and your mind has got settled into it, and you take it for granted. So in the other session that we have, the root session, we go into these more esoteric things, such as time, which you're very welcome to attend once you've settled into the community session. Just contact Lynn, and we'll talk to you about that. So what are the conclusions here? I think we're running out of time. Core lessons. First of all, Dhammapada Section 183. There are 3. By the way, intention is not really a good translation. We talk about the second of the Noble Truths as being right intention. But this is intention in the sense of what are you intending to do? So it really, I think a better word is resolution. What are you resolving to do? Now that you have a better understanding of the Buddha's teaching, how is it going to come into your life? What do you resolve? What do you resolve, or what do you intend to do about it? But I like the word resolution, because it suggests it's something that one has to do in one's attitude, if you like. So the three resolutions, let's call them, in the Dhammapada are renounce, or give up, or don't attach to so much stuff most of the time, and that non-harm, which also is ahimsa, or not non-violence. But it's not violence to insects, bees and butterflies and everything else as well. And thirdly, compassion or love. Compassion is looking at it in a bit of a negative way, that when there is something wrong. But love is something positive. There doesn't have to be anything wrong for one to feel love for somebody. Okay, so the 3 resolutions: renounce, non-harm, compassion. It may come as a surprise to you that the Buddha had a child. The time that his wife, he was then married, before he went wandering. As soon as he had the child was, according to the story, born the same day that he actually left. What that means, I don't know. But that child is Rahula, was a boy, and by the time he was 7 years of age, he was also ordained as a novice monk. And if you look at the Tipitaka, that is the teachings of the Buddha, there are many suttas there which are the Buddha talking to his young son, for example, chiding him when he wasn't totally truthful. And the Buddha says, you have to be truthful, all things considered. Why do you have to be truthful? Think of it, look, if you can't be truthful, if you can't be honest, how are you going to be honest about yourself? So how are you going to do mindfulness? How are you going to do right effort? It makes us uncomfortable sometimes. You know, we'd rather blame everybody else, but there you are. This is reality. Sorry, folks, this is the way it is. Finally, learn from a child. After all, you are one. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.